On December 7th, 2022, Germany witnessed one of its largest counter-terrorism operations of the post-war era. Over 3,000 security officers raided 150 homes and arrested numerous members belonging to a cell of heavily armed extremists that had planned to overthrow the federal government and elevate a man called Prince Heinrich XIII to the throne of a new German monarchy. If you're an avid listener of our Fight for the Republic series, you know that the monarchy collapsed in 1918 and that Germany has neither king nor Kaiser and all royal claims have been abolished. But, and this might come as a shock, Germany still has plenty of self-declared kings and emperors with thousands of followers. We even have competing so-called kingdoms with their own fantasy currencies, license plates, pension systems, and health insurances. The men and women who plotted the coup attempt not only included several officers of our special forces, a judge, and a former member of parliament, but all of these people belong to the so-called Reichsbürger scene, a movement that believes in the illegitimacy of the current government and yearns for a return to the German Reich. This movement has well over 20,000 members in Germany and is more bizarre than anyone could imagine. I'm Dan Arrows, this is the Iron Dice. Strap in as we dive deep into the Coen Brothers-like plot to overthrow democracy and the world of Germany's modern monarchs.
We are determined that the vicious German cycle of war, phony peace, shall once and for all time come to an end.
This is London Court. Here is a news flash. The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead.
Early this morning, the Soviet troops launched a general attack on Hungary.
Those who foolishly sought power by riding the back of the tiger ended up inside.
Tonight I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. None eyes have seen the...
Say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion.
Over 1 million people here celebrating a day that they never thought would come. A day in which Germany became one country again.
Launched the opening salvo of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
If the Iron Dice must roll, may God help us.
I don't even know where to exactly start with this one because the group of people we're going to talk about today is so weird that explaining it to folks on the outside can be quite the challenge. So there is this broad group in Germany that's called the Reichsbürger, literally translated to citizens of the Reich. And what makes explaining them so difficult is that they don't all believe the same things. There are different groups with different beliefs that don't necessarily understand themselves as belonging to the same movement. What ties them together, usually, is a rejection of the Federal Republic of Germany and its legal system. And that encompasses someone who believes that Germany is still occupied by the Allies and therefore not a sovereign state, all the way to people believing that the Federal Republic has morphed into a quasi-fascist, vaccine-mandating dictatorship and is therefore illegitimate. The people trying to pull off the recent coup plot seem to belong to the former category. The head figure of this group that was supposed to become the new German monarch is a guy named Prince Heinrich XIII, and he belongs to the minor noble family of Reuss. I'm not sure how this guy would have even justified his claim, considering that the Hohenzollern family, the family that actually ruled over Germany after 1871, is still around, regrettably so. Nonetheless, on December 7th, security officers stormed his residence, the hunting chateau Weidmannsheil, although the description chateau is a bit generous for his house. While this prince is a total wingnut, it wasn't him that put the police on notice about this plot, but a former member of Germany's special forces and a group called the United Patriots. Earlier this year, the United Patriots had planned to cause a blackout in Germany and use the ensuing chaos to abduct and most likely murder our health minister Karl Lauterbach. This group got busted by the authorities in April, and this member of the former Special Forces seems to have snitched on the prince and his followers. Following the arrest of the United Patriots in April, federal police observed those now arrested listening in on their calls and finding connections between the different members of this terrorist cell. Among others, these suspects included former and current members of Germany's Special Forces Command, a former police officer, a former member of parliament, a doctor, a lawyer, and followers of QAnon, wanting to put an end to the German deep state. And speaking of QAnon, it does look like these folks modeled their Day X, as they called it, after the January 6th insurrection, only that they were going to be much more organized and have a concrete plan. Now, you might ask yourself, is this actually that serious? Is there any chance that this would have succeeded in any way, creating a German monarchy in 2022? My opinion of that is yes and no. The prospect that no matter what these guys did, they would have been successful in overthrowing democracy and creating a new centralized state is dubious at best. I'd go as far as to say their attempt would have been totally futile. Germany's federal system is set up in a way as to make something like this damn near impossible, not to mention that the vast majority of Germans would not go along with this. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not serious, because it seems like this group was ready to go. They had a whole shadow cabinet figured out with former members of the Special Forces and the military taking over military affairs. A former member of parliament and judge was planned as justice minister. And this former member of parliament was a key figure in their plot since she supposedly still had her key card. Earlier this summer, police wiretapped her phone and recorded a conversation between her and others where they planned to use her old key card to let a death squad into parliament that would shoot the place up and take control. During the police raid, police found over 90 weapons stockpiled for this operation. They found handguns, rifles, crossbows, military equipment like night vision goggles, over 100,000 euro in cash, and several kilos of gold. You can see on the face of it, this all looks kind of goofy, but a scenario where a far-right death squad that had been training for this since January enters parliament is enough to be concerned about, in my book. Apparently, Prince Heinrich had also contacted Russian officials in Germany. It's not clear why, but I just hope that there is a recording of this prince talking to a Russian official about how he will be the German Kaiser soon, and the Russian guy just going, okay? Please, let that exist. That'd be awesome. So anyway, while this coup attempt failed, as I mentioned above, there are more than 20,000 people in Germany belonging to this Reichsbürger scene that shares these weird beliefs about our supposed puppet government. Trying to explain their beliefs is not that easy because the particular strain of delusional varies inside the movement, but you'll get the gist of it. If you're an American listening to this, you might think of your own crazy right-wingers, people that believe the 2020 election was stolen from Trump, but believe me when I say that they got nothing on the Reichsbürger scene in terms of craziness. All right, let's dive right into the logic of these people and why they're called citizens of the Reich. Because it's usually not the Third Reich this is referring to. Quick history lesson. When Germany was founded in 1871 under Kaiser Wilhelm I of House Hohenzollern, Germany became the Second Reich or Empire. The First Reich is the Holy Roman Empire. The second one, the so-called Wilhelminereich, that reigned from 1871 to 1918. And then obviously the Third Reich, which was Germany under Nazism. What Reichsbürger believe, in essence, is that pretty much every single state that was set up after 1918 is illegitimate for some reason or another. They will talk themselves into a frenzy about their theories why, in a legal sense, the current state is a fake creation. An example of this is the claim that because the Weimar Constitution was never officially abolished, only de facto by the Enabling Act, the German Reich is still the legitimate authority, not the Federal Republic, because German Reich was still the official name for the country in the interwar years. But of course, all of this is a lot of BS. It's an exercise in motivated reasoning where instead of looking at all the facts and coming to a conclusion, you sort of work backwards from it. They reject democracy and the republic, so they look for post hoc justifications to reject it. Any laws, documents, or taxes issued by the Federal Republic are, by extension, also illegitimate, and you'll often see these Reichsbürger create their own IDs and license plates. It's all really bizarre because, of course, you can find proof for anything if you look hard enough. One often cited example of this proof for the German government essentially being a private company that manages the geographic area of Germany rather than being a legitimate state is the German ID. The ID that every German citizen has is called the Personalausweis, or personal identification. But, get this, the word Personal has a double meaning in German, where it does not just mean personal, but also means staff or personnel. Is your mind blown yet? Now, you might wonder, isn't this whole Reichsbürger thing incompatible with Nazism, since the Third Reich, by their logic, was also illegitimate, and only the Kaiserreich is the true Germany? From what I could gather, that was an occasional point of friction among the scene, but all of that got kind of buried when COVID hit. That was the moment all these types, be it neo-Nazis, Reichsbürger, esoteric fascists, and other loons, coalesced around the cause of opposing the vaccine dictatorship. Just as a side note, there was never a government mandate to get vaxxed over here, but that doesn't really matter to them. During the height of COVID, we saw thousands of protesters flood the streets of Berlin with QAnon banners saying, "Please, Mr. President, make Germany great again," and that sort of stuff. There is an article about the recent coup attempt in Vox that interviewed Peter Neumann, a professor of security studies at King's College London, and they go into why QAnon is so heavily interwoven with this. The interviewer asks, QAnon is such a particularly American phenomenon, centering on a conspiracy theory in which a godlike Donald Trump saves the country from pedophiles. Somehow it appears to have been exported to Germany and other countries. How did that work? And I'm going to give you part of his answer here that I think is pretty important. He says, "We know, for example, that the second most used language in QAnon chat rooms on Telegram is German. The second most translated language of QAnon videos and documents is German. In August 2020, there was an attempt to storm the Reichstag, the German parliament. It was in the context of a demonstration, 100,000 people in the streets of Berlin. Some of these Reichsbürger were actually trying to enter the building, just like the Capitol on January 6th. They basically afterwards said that they'd been convinced that Donald Trump was in town, that he'd secretly flown to Berlin in order to liberate Germany. This was one of those rumors that was spread on QAnon follower telegrams." Now, if you're an American listening and are frequently embarrassed at the prevalence of QAnon in American society, you may find some solace with the fact that the German version of QAnon is even more pathetic. Relying on a president from another country to liberate your own is really as embarrassing as it gets. Putting that aside, let's get to the entertaining stuff, meaning the numerous efforts to create a legitimate German state by people in the Reichsbürger scene. Because if the current state is fake, the leadership for the real Germany, the Reich, is really up for grabs, right? It's a state that is just waiting to be governed, if you will. And there are numerous attempts to create this new state with inter-movement rivalries when one Reich doesn't recognize the other, and so on. I have a couple of examples for you here. The Republic of Free Germany was founded in 2012 by Peter Frühwald as the true successor state to the German Empire, instead of the so-called state simulation of the Federal Republic. Shortly after, the founder was subject to a coup for the leadership of the Republic of Free Germany and kicked out. The, quote, citizens of this new state frequently put up signs around their property reading that their house, individually, is part of the sovereign territory of the Republic of Free Germany in an attempt to avoid tax collectors and such. Unsuccessfully, as you might imagine. There was even the case of a trucking company not paying taxes and tolls because they claimed to be operating off of the Free Republic of Germany and not the Federal Republic. Now, this group around the Republic of Free Germany was heavily interwoven with a different group called Deutsche Polizeihilfswerk, or German Police Aid Organization, which was their police force in essence. They dressed up in fake uniforms, and there are numerous instances of these fake police officers arresting and tying up court-appointed bailiffs. Their reasoning for this was that they were simply doing a citizen's arrest on these bailiffs, since they have no authority because the Federal Republic of Germany is a fake state. Another of these fantasy states is the Free State of Prussia, whose members claim that Prussia was illegally dissolved at the end of World War II, so they kind of just rebooted it in their minds. In addition to that, they claim to still be at war with the Allied powers, technically, because there is no peace treaty. Of course, there is one. It's called the 2+4 agreement, but they probably consider that fake or something. Oh no, wait. It's signed by a country that doesn't really exist, so yeah, that makes sense. These fantasy states make tens of thousands of euros by issuing fake government documents, driver's licenses, license plates, and that sort of stuff. They also get a lot of donations. And speaking of making bank, here's where we get to my favorite character in all of this. It's a man named Peter Fitzek, who combines a lot of different strains in the Reichsbürger scene. He worked as a cook early in his life, but where his story gets interesting is when he opened an esotericism shop. I don't know how common they are in other countries, but around here it's mostly a shop that targets the stoner demographic. They sell dream catchers, esoteric books, crystals charged with energy, that sort of stuff. And from people visiting his shop, this guy was able to build a cult around himself that has become quite lucrative. Among other things, he claims to be able to cure any disease within himself with, quote, alternative medicine. In an interview with a German magazine, he said that he has helped multiple patients with terminal cancer to get back on their feet by tackling cause instead of symptoms, whatever that means. He ran for mayor and local parliament and got 0.7% of the vote in each occasion, which didn't prevent him from becoming the so-called King of Germany. In 2012, he and 600 of his followers held a big ceremony establishing the new state called Kingdom of Germany, with Peter Fitzek as the highest sovereign. There is a video of this online, and I strongly encourage you to look it up if you're in need for a laugh, because he and his subjects really take this pathetic play act seriously. On a huge stage, they put the royal garment around his shoulders, hand him the scepter and imperial orb before crowning him Peter the Great. They have their own flag that flies above all his properties, which is a combination of the German flag turned upside down with a rising sun imposed on it. By now, this guy owns multiple properties that he claims are not bound by German law. The way he acquired these is similar to how it happens in almost every cult. There are talks of him online showing this, where he encourages his followers to donate their property and extend the territory of the Kingdom of Germany, lest their houses are seized in the coming financial apocalypse. And cult is the appropriate term here. Among the various videos about the kingdom that float around online, there's also one where the kingdom's own public broadcaster films Peter Fitzek holding a meeting in an office building of some sort. And a couple of people present at this meeting ask if it's possible to have a bit more democratic control over all this money and property, only for their king to lock the doors and attempt to initiate a public trial for treason. At some point, the police is called and some lady starts screaming and crying. It's all really entertaining stuff. As of now, in 2022, this guy has acquired millions in assets from his followers and continues to expand his empire by buying old castles and the like. Now, I know what you're thinking, okay? Aren't the people giving all their money to this guy totally getting ripped off? Well, you can rest assured, because the Kingdom of Germany has its own central bank that hands out their own currency in exchange for real money. Right now, they are working on setting up self-sufficient villages with their own schools and hospitals that are free to use for everyone covered by the kingdom's own health insurance. Most of these located in East Germany, which is hardly surprising. They really need to get their act together over there. Anyway, the kingdom has 3 important basic principles you have to adhere to. Those being unmasked, untested, and unvaxxed, of course. As I mentioned above, the Reichsbürger movement, if you want to call it that, is not an organized movement in that sense, but just a hodgepodge of crazy. Taking these self-sufficient villages, for example, and the people that want to go there, it's not just folks who are motivated by the belief that Germany is still occupied by the Allies, but also folks wanting to live an alternative lifestyle or wanting to escape the supposed fascist vaccine regime that is the Federal Republic. If you have a hard time imagining a person that encompasses all these contradictory beliefs, I encourage you to look up the short documentary the magazine Spiegel TV did on the Kingdom of Germany this year. The TV crew shows up to an open house day of the kingdom and interviews some of those attending, and one guy sticks out in particular to me. They talk to a man who has a big unkempt beard and hair, and is also half bald. His remaining hair is styled in a way that makes it to look protruding from his head, and he is wearing red sunglasses and a leather necklace with a round carved stone at the end of it. He also seems to carry a hobbit-esque walking stick or something. In short, he looks like someone you would meet at the Burning Man festival. But when he then opens his mouth, he talks about how if you want to accomplish something great, you need a strong man to guide the direction and such. This guy really unites the different strains of crazy in the Reichsbürger scene, I think, where one can be for world peace and everyone living in self-organized, eco-friendly communes, but the way to get there is with a fascist dictatorship. Reading about the plans of the Kingdom of Germany on their website, the mind naturally wanders to things like Jonestown or other cults that ended in mass suicide. But if you ask me, the most likely scenario is probably just Peter Fitzek getting arrested for tax evasion. We'll see what the future brings. And I should mention that I could go on and on about these communities. There are dozens and dozens of self-declared monarchs or communities that claim to have succeeded from Germany. And reading about these kooks sure is funny. I get that. But there is another side to this that harks back to how we started this episode. A side that poses a real danger for the people living in our real, not imaginary country, and some of the people hoodwinked by charlatans like the King of Germany, because Peter Fitzek was already arrested once for multiple accounts of severe fraud in which his victims lost over 1 million euros in total. And that was 6 years ago, so by now this number has probably grown a lot higher. There are also a ton of instances where these Reichsbürger just snap and become violent. Their crimes aren't just driving without a valid license or the like. Frequently, there are cases of Reichsbürger stockpiling weapons and explosives that are part of plans to attack asylum seekers, elected officials, or police officers. It's somewhat similar to the people you saw storm the Capitol on January 6th, right? Because, yeah, the QAnon shaman and his ilk look ridiculous, and it's hard to take them seriously, which doesn't mean they don't pose a danger to society. This was also the response by the German right wing, claiming that this coup plot is a nothing burger, and why do we even care about these jokers? Here's my answer to that. Do you know who also had kooky ideas and didn't remotely come close to overthrowing Norway's democracy? Anders Breivik. And that guy still killed 77 people over his beliefs. The reason we haven't seen anything like this in Germany is not because people like him don't exist here, but because our security forces were on top of it so far. And this recent coup plot was much more than just one guy. The investigation into this terror cell and their plans also revealed numerous self-described homeland security forces all around the country that were going to assist the plotters' shadow army and launch attacks on local political bodies. A modern version of the Freikorps, if you will. And while their belief that it was possible for them to overthrow the government and turn Germany into a monarchy is silly and light years away from reality, their hatred is real. And that's about it for today, folks. Bit of a short one before the holidays. As always, thank you for listening, sharing, and supporting this podcast, especially if you're a patron. Thank you for another year of Iron Dice. We really couldn't do it without you. Follow the podcast on Twitter, if that still exists when you're listening to this episode, or on Instagram via the link in the podcast description. I hope you enjoy the holidays and wish you a happy new year. Until next time, and have a good one.